50. We appreciate you coming out this morning. Interesting topic, right, that we're all living in today. And we thought about a month ago, we were talking and somebody mentioned it in our office and we were like, you know what, that's a great topic. We don't want to get into politicalness of it. It may, I'm not sure, but we'll go with the flow. Workplace security. Active shooter, are you ready for an active shooter? And as we were talking about this, you know, there's things that I didn't know, and Murray and I have been talking over the past week about, you know, I didn't know that. A couple people in our office, I went up to them and were saying, you know, did you know this? I didn't know that. So, okay, this is great. And we have a great panel. We appreciate the panel and their time. We appreciate your time this morning. And I want to thank our host, Lawrence Technological University. They do a great job putting these on and working with us 6 months of the year, and we appreciate their hospitality. Bruce and his staff do a great job. Our sponsors today are AAA, Applied Imaging, CF Burger Creamery, and ITC Holdings Corporation. If you haven't been here before, again, we appreciate everybody, and if you haven't been here, it's very interactive. We want to answer your questions. We want these guys to answer your questions. So we'll be running around with a microphone. Just raise your hand. We'll get it over there. We're on Facebook Live for the first time. We appreciate the Southfield folks being here up on cable and whatnot. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host and moderator, Murray Feldman.
Thank you, Rob, and good morning, everyone. And first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to us on WWJ News Radio 950. Thank you to all of our Facebook fans out there who are watching us live. We hope that you will join in the conversation as well today. I want to start with a question. How many people in this room know about their workplace active shooter disaster plan? How many people? We have a lot of people. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, but not half of the people in here have heard about that. The people who have, are you in security? Are you in a safety-related field? No, you're not. You're just in workplaces that really are on top of it. But again, most in this room did not raise their hand. That is exactly why we are doing this topic today. And also for the people who may need to upgrade their systems, and that's why they are here as well. It's also exactly why we have this great panel of seasoned law enforcement officials with us. William Edwards is Principal and Director of Financial Investigations, Raymond Investigative Services, Troy. 37 years in the business, retired from the FBI in Detroit. He was a special agent. He's also a certified fraud examiner. Kevin Heidish, the Director of Security at the Detroit Athletic Club. He has been there for 10 years. He's charged with securing and protecting the facility, also providing protection for many dignitaries, domestic and also foreign, and political figures who attend events at the DAC. Jason Tagg is Director of Strategic Accounts for Guardian Alarm. He's been in the security industry for nearly 2 decades. His specialties include, but are not limited to, property management, auto dealerships, retail, commercial. He has worked heavily in life safety. That's what this is all about. That's why we're here, life safety. And the most important man in this room is right there. I say that because he's Steve Bogdalik, Executive Director, Campus Safety at LTU, Lawrence Technological University. That means that he is in charge of keeping you and me and everybody on this campus safe this morning. 28-year federal law enforcement veteran, special agent for the ATF in Detroit, Toledo, St. Paul, Los Angeles, and we appreciate the fact that he's taken time out of his busy schedule, as all of our guests have today, to be with us right here. When everybody leaves here, who is here, we will be giving you this to take back to your office. It is an outline of what a crisis management plan, a safety plan looks like, so it can help you get that plan together in your workplace. For our people who are watching us on Facebook Live, we'll make it available through our website. This was prepared for us by Bill Kowalski at Raymond Investigative Services in Troy, and they've been nice enough to allow us to pass it along to everybody here. One of the first things on there is the words, workplaces need to consider the possibilities before anything happens. Well, that sounds pretty obvious. Bill, I want to go to you. It's obvious, but it's not really done in a lot of workplaces, and that's the problem.
Yes. Can you hear me okay? That's exactly the problem. You know, it's one thing to have a plan, You need to practice that plan, and you have to understand that no two situations are the same. It's always going to be different. The plan has to be very flexible, and if you practice, and you always get it right, then there's something wrong with the plan. You have to understand that, because it's never going to be the same. So you have to have a team that's put together that you can go to discuss that plan. So you have team leaders. That plan may consist of 4 to 10 people. Those people bring something different to the table, and that's what makes the plan effective. So it's practice. Try to find the scenarios that are unexpected, but you'll never figure them all out, because, like I say, every situation is going to be different. So you can't get comfortable with that plan. The most important thing is those team leaders and the people that are involved in the plan, they have to work together. You have to be comfortable with your teammates. It's just like when law enforcement comes into that situation. Why are they so good? It's because they know what each individual brings to that team, and they can trust each other. They can depend on each other. And so in-house, those employees that are members of that plan organization, they have to trust in each other. They have to depend on each other. And when something happens, they can look at each other and they know what's going to happen. They know how someone's going to react. So that's the starting point.
All right, that is the starting point. But Kevin, how do we really begin developing that plan?
Well, I think it kind of depends on your organization. Every organization is different. You know, at the DAC, we have a security department, but I'm not sure if everybody out there, what organizations you represent, if you have a security department. How many of you do? Okay, so that's probably maybe 20% of the room. Okay, so that can be an issue, because the people in the security field obviously have that in them to be leaders in those kind of situations. But so you need to go back to your corporations and whoever you report to and sit down and talk to them about how do you start. And the people that don't have a security department, I think where you start is to reach out to the experts, to a consulting firm to come in and evaluate your business. Okay, so he can sit down or she can sit down with your leadership group and find out the goals that you want to put in place and accomplish. For these that do have security departments, you have to go back and you have to reevaluate that. I've been at the club now for 10 years, and we're all kind of become creatures of habit and get in your daily lives, you come and go and so forth. We go through and we train our teams, but last year we reached out to a company that came in and did a security assessment on my department. Okay, so sometimes that can be kind of humbling, right? Because you think, I got it down, I'm the man, my team's good, and so forth. They come in, they evaluate you and give you some successes that you do well and opportunities that you need to improve on. So it kind of depends on your organization, where you're at, but you need to start somewhere, and you need to start now. Okay? So kind of expand on that. I would definitely make sure you reach out to someone, and I can help you with that. As any of these gentlemen up here, I'm sure could help with that and get you in the right direction.
Jason, you had told me last week that you have to create awareness. Tell me about awareness.
Well, I think awareness is accomplished through a couple different forms. One, to kind of dovetail what Kevin said, I think it's the awareness that we need to turn the lens inward. Typically, security is an afterthought. We check the box, we validate the need to have technology in our environments, but what do we do? What do we do with that technology? Well, if we don't have a plan, there's not really much you can do. And it's usually reactive. We're all on our heels. It's after the fact. So by creating awareness, both in your workplace environments, on your campus, you want to, through signage, you want to make sure that people are aware. Just when we go to the airport, they tell you, don't leave your luggage unattended. When you think about that stuff, we need these kind reminders to let us know that we're in a safe and secure area. These are some simple things that we can do to create awareness of the security measures that are on campus. The other thing is, like Kevin said, get with your executive leadership team, get with your facilities people, get with your human resources department. The conversations today are critical, timely, and they can be a little uncomfortable. it's hard to think about what could potentially happen in our workplace environments. Creating awareness through teams, signage, and just practicing exercises. Something as simple as access control. Access control is the #1 defense against active shooter. If you don't have it, I suggest you look into it. But there's this thing called piggybacking. I've been working with Kevin for 20 years. I'm always going to let Kevin in the door. But Kevin was terminated yesterday, and I don't know that. So Human Resources needs to get on the ball and alert everybody, because if Kevin has a bad day because he got fired yesterday and I let him in and I don't know that he was terminated, some bad stuff could probably happen. So we got to create awareness through signage, through communications, through corporate emails. The more aware we are, to what Bill said, we have teammates that we can trust. We know what actions to take. We'll have maybe some team leads. But it all starts with the awareness in your workplace environment.
And it's important to continue to reevaluate where you are and what you're doing. And Steve, I know you made some very significant changes here in the past year.
We did. And in the not too distant past, Lawrence Tech undertook an assessment. And it's painful to sometimes hear where you're not reaching 100% effectiveness. Lawrence Tech has very good leadership. They were able to take a look at the things that were brought forward in the assessment. We've made significant changes since that time. One of our main accomplishments most recently is we started carrying firearms on campus. Not all of our officers, but those who are retired police officers who have been through a recognized police academy, and we have 7 of those. We carry firearms on campus now, and my argument is that we are not the police here at LTU. We're not sworn. We're not cops. But there is going to be a period of time when an event happens that we have to hold down the fort until the cavalry comes, until Southfield PD can get here, and that's about, on average, about 7 minutes to our campus. So for those 7 minutes, my campus safety officers who are armed have to find out where the shooter is and engage the shooter, if possible, to eliminate that threat before Southfield gets here. We've added number of cameras to campus. We have done a better job of restricting access to campus through our prox reader system. We can individually control what rooms you have available to you versus your prox reader. And we also, and I think this one gets left off a lot, you have to protect your data. We get phished all the time through emails, either to myself or the president of the university or to anyone who has an email account. Phishing is very active, and if you're not protecting your student data, the social security numbers, the dates of birth of your students, that's another level where you're vulnerable. It's just not about people carrying guns and looking for the active shooter. There's multiple layers of safety at a university or a business, and Lawrence Tech has been very much on the forefront of giving me what I need to implement those changes.
Good points. By the way, if anybody has any questions, raise your hand. Our Facebook friends, if you have any questions, just put them out there on the screen and we will get to them too as soon as we can. I do want to mention that all the questions we're going to try to answer for you today. In about 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to go through exactly what should happen in a crisis situation. It's a tough subject to talk about, but we're going to do that and go through and see what our experts think about some of the things that we don't realize that we should be doing. We just heard about extra cameras. Jason, you're really big on interactive monitoring of all types. And I know you were just at a trade show yesterday. You got back in the middle of the night and you're nice enough to be here for us. But that's a big part of what's happening today in the workplaces of America as they change and adapt.
Yeah, so as you look at technology, and Guardian Alarm, has a myriad of technologies to help secure your environments, from video cameras to access control, intrusion alarm, as well as fire systems. One unique thing that's really coming to the forefront, it's becoming more popular, is you may have heard of remote monitoring, remote interactive monitoring. This is almost like a security on demand. A lot of these places may not have security teams in place. It's where you can take the cameras, layer on two-way audio, and at any given time, through analytics that can trigger events, people can trigger events, whether it's through a panic button, whether it's through a duress button that's hardwired, or a direct in-dial call into our monitoring center. We can essentially bring those cameras to life. We can intervene at the first sign of threat, assess the situation, and be standing at the ready to dispatch police and alert key management people. What this does is, a lot of times we know the physical guarding world, and physical guards have a wonderful place in the workplace environment. But as we all know, we're only as good as where he or she stands. With today's technology, the resolution, the analytics, you bring these to life, you can actually intervene, and what it does is it allows you to help mitigate any loss, modify behaviors on both sides of the counter, whether it's a customer, a disruptive customer, or maybe it's just to make sure that your employees stand up a little bit taller. Our mission with remote monitoring is to help you to better protect your people, property, and assets, and to have that line of communication. Security on demand. When I don't feel comfortable because of a certain situation, I can engage somebody to assess and take the appropriate steps and really be an extension of the team. And we infuse your training into our training so that our lens is calibrated with your lens, and we take the appropriate steps based on your plan. So it's a very effective way of getting ahead of unwanted behavior and, like I said, modifying behavior.
Somebody in this room came up to me before and said, you know, we've just updated our security, and I have this badge, and it has a picture of me on there, and it's even got a barcode on there. Kevin, what about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, badges are terrific, right? I mean, they let you know who you are as from a security side standpoint. You know, if I'm, you know, at the club and I see an employee that's new, obviously I know that they're employed there. But, you know, when I look at those things, but it's out in the public, so if you're here at the university and you're having to get in and out of your buildings and so forth, and then you go out to lunch, you know, it's on your lapel or it's on your hip. Do you really need that to get into the Coney Island? You know, where you're eating lunch? I mean, because if you have somebody that has some bad intentions and they're scoping the building out, I mean, I could sit there, take a picture of that as you're eating lunch, go back, and create a badge. I mean, you can get those things online all day long, right? So now I can get into the building, I can get to a checkpoint. Maybe that guard there, maybe they have an off day, and I can't scan myself in, but it looks like I'm there. Well, I'm here to meet with Mr. So-and-so. I got to meet him in 5 minutes. It's very important. I got to get up there. Maybe the guard says, okay, let him through. And now you have an intruder. So if you wear badges, I would make sure you have a policy in place that those are on while you're on property, while you're in a building that you're supposed to be. But once you're off, you know, you're not wearing them at the grocery store, restaurants, and that kind of thing.
And Bill, what about gaining access to a building? There are plenty of people who come into every building as workers, not necessarily first-line workers, but maybe secondary workers. Maybe they work for vendors. Maybe they work for somebody else who comes in, who we allow in. We don't know who these people are. How do you deal with something like that? You just have to know the companies that you're dealing with and trust them and hope that they have done their due diligence.
Exactly. You know, you're talking about vendors having access to your facility. What do you know about those vendors? You might consider doing background checks with the concurrence of the vendor. Let them know that, you know, you have some issues with people having direct access to your facility. So you do a logical background check. Does the person have a criminal history? Have they been involved in possibly domestic issues? And you know, you may want to kind of communicate with that vendor, not only because that individual may have some personal issues that they're dealing with. You don't know how they're going to react, who they're going to take those issues out on, and that's the same thing with internally. Management must have an open door policy and deal with those personal issues. I would guess there are many active shooting type situations that originate from personal problems than there are from the random issues. So you have to be aware of that. and it happens every day. So, and considering access to the facility, how many of us have a receptionist setting there, a man or a lady that they're the first defense? And someone mentioned, having a button that can lock the front door, or an alarm that can set off to let someone know that there's something suspicious about to happen. So, but once again, those vendors, those people that have access to your facility, think about the backgrounds. Have those backgrounds done on them to make sure that they're good employees and they don't have a history of any problems. And you can get that through the executive staff of the vendors. It's not embarrassing to ask them, this individual comes into our space 2 or 3 times a week. Is there anything we need to know about that person?
And just to piggyback that, I think we also need to be mindful of taking the time. If you all know who's coming into your building, if you have a relationship with these people, you have to make sure that, yes, that your vendors have properly vetted these individuals. But more importantly, when they're coming into your environment, make sure that you're registering their visit with the appropriate staff that might be the greeter, the attendant, giving them a heads up in preparation, and putting policies and procedures in place to verify who those individuals are, checking their ID. It's an extra level of security and awareness of who is in your facility. Some of the things we're talking about are seemingly inconvenient compared to what we might do today. But we have to change our approach. We have to overcome the inconvenience and understand that it's your own personal safety and it's the safety of your coworkers. So these little measures, the more barriers of defense that you can create before it gets into your ecosystem, the better off you are.
And Kevin, you were telling me that it's your neighbors you have to look out for as well, because you may be doing everything that you should be doing in your facility, but what about the neighbors? What about the people next door? You're in a situation, for example, where you have 2 stadiums right nearby. What kind of issue does that present?
Well, that presents a lot of issues. Gosh, that's a big one. Well, as you said, the important thing is the partnerships that you have with your neighbors, your community. Whether that's with DPD that we have strong relationships with, or security over at Comerica Park or Ford Field, or we rent space over in the Grand Valley building right next to us, so we have to have good relationships with them as well. But our threat levels go up and down. If you're not familiar with our building, we're right in the center field of Comerica Park, so our threat levels go up and down based on Tuesday morning if we have a dignitary in the building, or Friday night when there's a baseball game or a football game, concerts and that kind of thing. So working with them, and I just had lunch with the gentleman from Comerica Park the other day where they did a study on a threat assessment of each building around them based off the Las Vegas shooting. We did some measurements from our rooftop, from our restaurants, from the Grand Valley building, the Opera House, and that kind of thing. So there's plans that are put in place to counteract that. But the important thing is to reach out to the people next to you and see what they need help with or what you may need help with. You just can't be a silo and sit there by yourself and take care of yourself. You got to take care of your neighbors, because when something like this happens, you have an active shooter, it's complete chaos. And we look at what's the biggest opportunity that could happen where the most damage could be done, and that's just before a game time when there's hundreds of people outside the gate or at the football field or at the stadium. I mean, that's pretty much when you can pick a lot of people off. Getting a weapon in those places is very difficult based on the security programs they have in place, but it's the streets that are most vulnerable, because once that happens, chaos ensues and people take off running, right? So it's very important to know what to do with that. But reach out to your neighbors, especially those that don't have security departments. Maybe they do, and they can help out. I mean, we reach out and we help people around us all the time. So.
One thing I want to add to that, you want to be very aware of individuals with uniforms on. Our organization, we work with financial institutions. A good example is we had a bank in California that's a client of ours, and they wanted us to determine if we could infiltrate their space. We take one of our employees, he does this a lot, we dress him up in a California Bell uniform. And Joe was able to enter the bank with the employees that morning under the premise that he was checking their phone system, and had he had a gun, he was inside. What did Joe do? He was able to steal a laptop and walk out and hand it to the CFO down in the lobby, all because he had this uniform on and said he was there to check the phones. No one checked his identification, and boom, he was inside the facility. And all of the employees were running around getting ready for the day. He had fair game with everybody in that facility. So be aware of those that come, you might consider them vendors, but they have a uniform on. Make them show their ID and know who they are.
And let us not forget, in the news just this week, 2 local police departments had uniforms stolen from the dry cleaners where they sent. Maybe they should do their own dry cleaning. Seriously. What about that? What about
when
how do you
I
handle
heard that the uniforms today, I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now, right? Because most people, you see a uniform, it's a police uniform, you think you're safe and they're legit. But I'll tell you a quick funny story. A couple years ago, we had some dignitaries coming in, and the Secret Service came in, and they wanted to walk through the building and so forth, and flash their badge. And a lot of people say, oh, okay, come on in, where you want to go, and I was like, wait a minute, normally the process for the last, since I've been there is they call, identify themselves as what we want to do, we set up a time. This gentleman came in, wanted to go see the club, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't like the way he was acting and so forth, so I called my contact over there and gave him the name, description, like, oh yeah, he's one of ours, sorry for that and what have you. But even someone with a badge, you still got to check them out sometimes because you just never know. Luckily, fortunately that time he was a legitimate officer, but those things you have to look at.
Any questions at this point for anybody? Okay, let's go through a situation. We've already talked about the need for a plan, that you have to have a plan, you have to be prepared. We've already talked about the need that plan has to have awareness, you have to have signage, you have to have lighting, you have to let people know that the place is being guarded. We've talked about knowing the knowledge of the people who are working with you, any personal problems they may have. What about the vendors, the people who come in? We've talked about all of that. But you can't have a 100% secure building, I believe. And Kevin, I asked you because you had a situation last week or the week before where you had officials come in to test, to see how well your place was, and I said, well, how'd you do in it? And you said, even the White House isn't 100% secure, and we know.
Well, that was more based off of our assessment that when
an assessment, important.
Yeah, assessment. They came through and looked at our policies and procedures and what my team does and so forth, and I would agree. There's no building that's 100% secure, and it's the comment I made to Murray was that people got in the White House before, and to me that's a big issue, right? So if they get in the White House, they can get in anywhere. But that's why you have those programs in place to check vendors at the street level and make them go through security or not be afraid to challenge people that you don't recognize and so forth, And that's a big part of it, because if you don't recognize them, there's a reason for that. And we all work with people that you see every day, and all of a sudden there's a new face. Who is that? And who do you go to ask those questions and verify that?
I'll tell you a story, though. I've been at the White House before, and I've also been at Ford Motor Company's Design Center. It was actually harder to get into the Design Center. I needed more security, and there were more precautions that I saw being taken than at the White House. But again, the professionals may say, you don't see it all. That's part of the security situation. That's part of the system. That's why it's there the way it is. So if it should happen to a building where you're working, a restaurant that you're visiting, a gym where you're working out, the first thing is getting away from the shooter. That's the top priority, and so many experts are saying, leave your belongings and get away from the shooter. How do we do that? What do we do? What do we listen for?
I think on a basic level, how many here have heard the campaign Run, Hide, Fight? Good. It's just that. Number one, if you can get away, you haul ass and you get away. That's not always the case. So the next is hide, barricade yourself. Murray and I had a conversation. He made a good point. You're seeing workspaces change today. They're wide open. There's a lot of glass. How do you go hide? Get with your team, find a plan. Use anything, furniture, get under tables, barricade yourself, try to block doors, anywhere you can find shelter, and hopefully at that point in time, once you've barricaded yourself, you can alert the authorities. Lastly, fight. That's a hard one, right? But you're in a situation where it comes down to you and that individual, or your team and that individual. Use everything you can to fight. Some practices you may have heard: students bringing soup cans to school. Every student having a soup can in their desk. You get 30 soup cans thrown at you, it's going to kind of throw you off your game a little bit, right? It's going to probably hurt. But these are the types of simple things that we can do to run interference, to delay, to disorient. So whether it's a table, a chair, if everybody's throwing the chair at the same time, it's going to make an impact. This is where the conversation gets a little bit uncomfortable, but I do recommend, for those of you that did not raise your hand, go on YouTube. Look up the Run, Hide, Fight video. It's powerful. It makes you think, and it really gives you an idea of what real-time action, response from a coworker standpoint. And really, too, part of that, when you do run, I failed to mention, look at your surrounding areas. Designate areas maybe in your neighbor's property to get out and all have a designated meeting place, okay, so we can start taking a head count and make sure that the receptionist and everybody knows how many people are in the building so that you can do your part in helping to get a count of how many people were able to get out versus how many people might still be in the building.
Very quickly, that then is part of the plan. Have a listing of people. If you're going to take something with you, if there's HR, management, whoever is in charge of your building security, know all the people who are supposed to be in there, know that they're able to go someplace at a central location, maybe away from the situation, and how to communicate with them, where that they should call and let people know that they're okay. Warn and prevent individuals from entering the area where the active shooter may be. Maybe hang a sign in a window if you're taking cover in that window for first responders to see. Anybody want to jump in there, or if not, we'll continue to go down the list.
No, I think some of those things. If you have a cell phone, if you can post anything like that to give visibility to the outside world. I mean, really, although in a traumatic situation, it's hard to apply common sense. This is why we have to have the plan. We've got to rehearse that plan. And yes, it's disruptive to business. On the other side of that, it's worth it. It's worth it. And we can't become complacent. We have to make sure that we're thinking all different scenarios, and ultimately don't get complacent with doing the same thing over again.
We have a question right here. We'll get a microphone right to you.
We're here representing a church with an attached school. So doing an active shooter drill, how do you do that without scaring the kids to death? I mean, you prepare them, of course, but how do you do it without scaring them to death?
It's a great question, and it's a great point, and I think all of us who are parents or grandparents are wondering, how do you explain to the kids what's going on that they need to know for their own protection?
I'll just comment briefly on that. I've had some experience with the Secret Service. They've gone around the country over the years conducting assessments at K through 12 and helping schools develop active shooter training in their schools. They don't do active shooter training with the students in class. There's a number of ways you can conduct an active shooter training. You can do a tabletop exercise, which is the least invasive and takes the least amount of time, but it's primarily for executive leadership. What are we going to do if this happens? Who are we going to call? What are our notifications going to be? Where will the parents gather? Those kind of things. I've also participated in active shooter training at middle schools where it's an exercise for the teachers. They engage local law enforcement. They engage federal agencies. I was a federal agent at the time. And they actually have a school filled with teachers, no students, and we actually participate with an actual gunman, of course not using real ammunition, simunitions. And the whole exercise is monitored to see how the school implements their emergency response plan that's been developed by the school district. And then the Secret Service then provides an assessment to the school. Here's where you were successful, here's where you failed. So you don't have to engage the students in that. It's more for your leadership. The teacher's telling students, if this happens, here's what we're going to do. The students don't need to necessarily be part of that, particularly if it's elementary school. I've not participated in any active shooter training where students were actively engaged in the exercise.
I think we have a question that's actually coming to us from our Facebook friends over there. We're going to get a microphone so we could do that. Question for you. There is one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is 911. We haven't said call 911. It's not the first thing you should do, many law enforcement officials say. Make sure you're safe, make sure you know what's happening, make sure you help others to a safe place if you have to. And then, when we dial 911, we should know where we are, the address, where we are in the building, and maybe anything you can say about the incident, the shooter, a weapon, if possible.
I think one of the things that you can't train for is what you're really going to do when you're under stress. I hate to use quotes, but Mike Tyson has this great quote. It's like, everybody has a great plan until you get punched in the mouth. When there's actually a crisis, whether it's active shooter, a domestic violence situation, a student and a professor, the tension level goes up, your anxiety goes up, you get tunnel vision, you get tunnel hearing. You honestly, as an individual, don't know what you're going to do because you can't practice that. Many people can't find their phone. They don't know what their address is. They can't tell the 911 operator what their address is, which is why I think when you have these plans, you need to encourage individuals to take individual responsibility for yourself and your coworkers first, the run, hide, fight mantra, and then, if you remember, call 911. If everybody calls 911, ultimately the message will get through. But I think asking people to do fine motor skill exercises like finding their cell phone, remembering their code, when their shots are being fired down the hall, I think that's a real challenge to ask people to do that with great accuracy.
We have a question that has come from Facebook. George Fox is our videographer from WWJ, and he is manning the Facebook page right now. George?
Yeah, thanks, Murray. Someone mentioned earlier about trusting your coworkers, trusting your workplace, and Marie Jackson was just asking for some clarification on that. What do you mean, trust each other, you have to stay ready? Is there any way that you can elaborate on that? I'm not sure who mentioned trusting your coworkers, trusting your workplace.
Great. Thanks for the question.
I think that was me, and I guess the way I compared that was when law enforcement comes through the door, they come through as a team. Everybody has an assignment. If you watch them move to clear a building, it's very methodical, and everybody knows what everybody's responsibility is. That plan, and as you develop that plan in-house, and you create that team in-house, they have to have that same working relationship. When that first shot is fired, they have to react, and they have to be able to trust their teammates and know that if John is supposed to go and secure a certain room, they shouldn't even have to think about that. They should know that John's going to do that. They have to trust their teammates. They have to know that their teammates are going to methodically, if the situation requires, to go through the motions to protect everybody.
Thank you. I have one more. Mark Ruma is asking, are there any comments on bulletproof backpacks or inserts for backpacks? Do you have any experience with those, or are they effective?
I have no experience with bulletproof backpacks.
Thank you.
Probably speaks for itself. Yeah. Unsure right now, and maybe because we haven't heard that much about it, that there's not a lot of research on it in any kind of real-life situation. But we thank you for that question, and if we can get an answer, we will do that. So we're talking about this plan, and this plan should have, we have a question over here, We'll be right over to you with the microphone. This plan should have responsibilities in it for everybody, and that you should be able to trust the people who are taking steps that they have been told to do in this plan to help protect everybody. One of the things that we hear is that you should also perhaps try to text message or use social media to tag your location, maybe text message law enforcement officials, because everybody has a gun these days, and if you can't get, when you call 911, you don't want to speak loudly because you don't want to make a lot of noise, which is why one of the tips is also to silence all of your electronic devices as well. So there's the text message situation that could come into play as well if somebody's in that dire situation. Yes, we have a question right here.
Going back to the question on bulletproof backpacks, a backpack with a bunch of books in it will act as a bulletproof barrier somewhat. It may not stop a 223 round, but you put that arithmetic book in there, you put the science book in there, you put several books in there, and have the child, if it's the case where there's children or on a college campus, they can hug that backpack to their front, keep it over their face, and that's something that will act as a barrier. So that's something they can use in that case.
Very good point there, a full backpack. We hear that they're heavy and they're dangerous for kids, but they could be a lifesaver too in a situation like that. Stay in place until law enforcement comes. Maybe it'll take just minutes until law enforcement comes. Stay in place. I have read that we shouldn't all be in a group together, that we should spread out. Try to be in different locations separately, even though we may want to be with each other. Try to spread out separately, which would make an active shooter situation probably not as severe as it could be if everybody was in one spot. Comments? Thoughts?
Well, I think as Bill said earlier, every situation is different, right? This isn't scripted where you go out to a 7-course meal and salad comes, soup comes, food comes, dessert comes, drink comes, after drink, that kind of thing. It changes. Every second it changes. So, as Jason said, run, hide, fight. It might be run, hide, run, fight. Depends how many assailants. Might be run, hide again, fight. Depends on where you're at. So it's going to change. So you can't say, well, we shouldn't be in a group, or we should spread out, or we should do this. It comes down to personal situational awareness, any training that you've taken, how you react. And the tough thing is we have a limited time, but when you have these plans and they change, and you run, you hide, you fight, now the police come in, and these gentlemen that have experience doing it come in, that's a very, very difficult situation now, okay? Because you may have worked with somebody for 20 years and you're very tight and you vacation together, whatever you may do, or as Jason sits next to me. Now Jason's been shot, right? Jason's shot in the chest, he's shot in the head, half of his head's missing, and I got to get out of the building, right? I got to step over him. Friends got to step over him. Police are coming in. They're there to take that assailant out. They're going to step over him. Okay, so it's a very difficult situation. So you can't script it and say, you got to get in a group, you got to spread out, you got to do this, you got to do that. You have to react and you got to move. That a lot comes down to your personal responsibility of that gunshot goes off. How fast can you run? How far can you run? Anybody in this room run 100 yards as fast as you can?
We don't know until we have to.
See any hands, right? But hey. But maybe you should think about when I go to the gym, maybe I should train on those things. Maybe I should get out and run around the block and be able to do that, because when that gunshot goes off and you can only run 20 yards, now you're still in that line of fire, right? So these things change all the time. When you barricade yourself, those are the doors. I don't want to barricade myself right here, right under the stage, because now we still have that line of fire. If I'm a barricade, I'm going to barricade near that door. I'm going to hide near that door, so when he comes through, I can tackle that person, or I could take my belt off and wrap it around that door closure so they can't get in. Okay, there's a bunch of different things you can do. So I don't want to say, don't get in a group or get in a group, because everything changes by the second, half a second.
Those words, run, hide, fight, Steve, they were used as a text message, weren't they, at a university where there was an issue?
Most recently, if I recall correctly, it was at Ohio State, and they had an active shooter on campus. They issued a broadcast message. That's all it said was, run, hide, fight, active shooter. There's no need to expound on that, because if you've messaged properly to your university and to your people, they know what run, hide, fight means. Fortunately, in that instance, the responding officer was very close by, and he was able to eliminate the threat. I think the guy had stabbed a couple people on the sidewalk. We use the RAVE system here. It's a mass notification system. We use Run, Hide, Fight. We use them from a variety of issues, whether it's weather, power outage, schools canceled. I think many businesses and higher ed institutions are going to a mass notification system. How can we reach the most people quickly with a very succinct message that tells them what to do, and stand by for further instruction?
All right, so we have the plan in place. We know what to do. People are doing it. The situation has happened. We're taking cover. We're calling the officials, and the officials are finally starting to come. Their first priority is to end the crisis, to end the situation. It's not to help me out. As we were mentioning, it's not to help somebody who may be injured. They may be stepping over that person. Their first response is to try to stop that situation. When they come into a situation, how do they know if we're a good guy or a bad guy? One of the tips that we have been suggesting and that we have been receiving from law enforcement officials is to make sure that your hands are empty and that your hands are clean and visible. And that will alert the people who are coming in that they can just go past you and end that incident and that you're not a problem.
Yes, not only hands up, hands empty, immediately obey their directions. Because if they have to hesitate 1 or 2 seconds, that's just maybe another life that could be endangered. So if they say, get on the floor, and they use explicitives, get on the floor. Don't even hesitate. That's first and foremost. Listen to what they say.
How do we know when we're in the clear? How do we know when it's okay? And every situation is going to be different.
Well, ultimately, you're going to get the all clear from the police department. But you got to remember, that's going to take considerable time. If you look at the shooting in Florida, I think it took them 3 or 4 hours to finally clear the building. But back to the point that was just being made about showing your hands and all that, that's a very difficult job for law enforcement because they have no idea. Unless they have a description, they don't know if you're a friend of the shooter, with the shooter, or you are the shooter. In fact, in Florida, the shooter walked out the building with the students. It's not easy to figure out who is who. But I do think that, you have to be patient in a time of crisis because you remember all the things that are going on. Everybody has a heightened level of anxiety. Police are anxious. You're anxious and scared. Your coworkers may be crying. You may be crying. If it's me, I'm holding still until somebody says there's no more gunmen out there or somebody who could harm me. And I think people, parents in particular at a school, want things to be done quickly so they can retrieve their students, get their stuff, and get out of here. Well, in reality, it doesn't happen that way. That's a crime scene. And once they neutralize and find the shooter, then you have to treat it as such. I will just add on to that quickly. Universities and businesses need to consider where is their off-site command and control location going to be if there's a shooting in their building and the police say, hey, these 5 floors are now a crime scene. How are you going to conduct business? You're not going to be able to go into the crime scene. They're not going to allow you to go to your desk and your computer. We have an off-site location here that we utilize for that very purpose. If there's a shooting at Lawrence Tech and we get shut down, the executive leadership of the university can go to an off-site, plug in their computer, have the same phone numbers to function as a business until that's resolved. And that's an important thing that businesses and schools need to think about.
Not only for active shooter situations, but also for any other natural disaster or emergency. Jason, you were telling me about a school recently in metropolitan Detroit that made some changes.
Yeah, and I won't name names.
No, we're not naming names.
So post Sandy Hook, everybody kind of talks about it, looks inward. What can we do? One of the school districts added a vestibule that was intended to be locked down and then go through the verification process before they gained entrance into the school. As time fades, we think these things are in the rear view and those controls become a little laxed. Unfortunately, my daughter's 16th birthday, I brought her a little card and a stuffed animal at school. And I went through that vestibule, and that vestibule was wide open. And I had 3 people here, and I had 4 people here. And they were the gateway to that school. And somebody with bad intentions could have easily made it right through. I'm happy to report since then, with the most recent events, they've gone back to it, they've changed the policy, and it has been locked down. We've got to put these controls in place, and we got to stick with it, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is the world we live in. It's not going to change. We've got to be mindful of this, and we've got to protect one another. One of the things I do want to make a recommendation to all of you, a lot of your local police departments have a crime prevention department. We talk about crisis, trauma, what are we going to do? Understand what their plan is. Understand what their approach is. Help them to familiarize themselves with your facility. If you have maps and you can share that with them, they know how to navigate your facility. And once you have your plan in place, they really like to be informed of that so that they know how to approach, they know the different areas of the building and how they need to approach their plan. So I think that's a really good outreach, and I think in that they'll give you good information, because every facility is different, everybody's set up differently, and they have a lot of best practices that I think that you'll benefit from greatly.
And we have a question right here.
It's more of an observation than a question. We've been talking about calling 911, but I'm not sure that everybody in the room realizes that the 911 database that is utilized by the public safety answering point is pretty detailed now. And if you don't know what is going to display at the PSAP, as they call it, you may want to get in touch with Oakland County 911, Wayne County 911, whatever, and actually do a test, because 911 now can be defined down to an individual room number within a building, which gives authorities a better idea of where to go.
Comments, thoughts?
That's the E911 system that's evolving.
Correct.
That applies if you were calling 911 from your desk phone. But if you're out in the open or you're running from point to point, you're going to be calling from your cell phone. It'll be hard for some people under stress to say, hey, I'm in this field and there's a couple buildings around and there's grass. And, if you happen to be at your desk, it will give you, there's a requirement now that it actually give the address and the building number and the room number of the facility that you're in when it hits the 911 system, but that's not there yet for cell phones.
Any other questions? Just raise your hand. While we're getting the mic over there. Okay, go on. Yeah.
Hello, I'm here on behalf of a charter school, and I'm wondering what is the best practices to ensure that we have a good policy for safety? I mean, you mentioned the Secret Service. Is there something that we would model something after?
I would say definitely you have to reach out. The first thing I would do is I'd reach out to a consulting firm and have them come in and evaluate your building.
Okay.
As the gentleman asked earlier about schools and active shooter drills, I mean, if you have 3rd and 4th graders, they don't have the mental capacity to understand what you're trying to teach them, and the importance of it and what to do when that happens, as Steve has said. But I would definitely reach out to a consulting firm and have them come in and evaluate that. That's going to be your best way to get started.
Okay, thank you.
What about local law enforcement? I'm sorry.
I have a comment to make. We're running out of time, and I know this is workplace safety. And it's kind of evolved into an active shooter thing, and it's important to know that the likelihood of you being involved in this is very minimal. But you have to know what to do. Okay, but we talk about crisis plans, but one of the first things we got to get started with is a workplace violence program. Okay, so you have a pre-event, an event, and post-event. So your workplace violence is a pre-event. How we can identify those people. As I see a young man in the front row here, if we work together for a while, and he's starting to show up. It gives you some keys to look at. If he's starting to show up late to work frequently, or calling off, or acting, just in an odd behavior, I could take that to my HR department and say, hey, Jason's acting a little bit funny lately, and I've noticed it sounds like he's going through divorce and what have you, and you get some preemptive interaction with that person or counseling or what have you. Then you get into the incident itself, and your emergency plan is more than just an active shooter plan. I mean, it's important, right? It's very important. But you also have to know what to do in a medical emergency situation. There's a fire, right? There's a bomb threat, maybe whatever facility, and there's a chemical spill. What am I looking for? Like a civil disturbance outside, depending on where your building's at. So you have to have a lot of components in that plan to know how to react, and you test those things individually, okay? And then you have the event itself. You have a post-event, as Steve had mentioned. His executive staff goes off-site. Where do they go? Do they practice that? Okay, and then you do get an active shooter situation. You have to have places for your employees to go to. Okay, so you have to have those firms in place for counseling and so forth, because in that situation, when there's dead people all around and there's blood and that smell, that's going to stick with them for years. Okay, and they need immediate attention on how to deal with these type of things. It's not just we got the all clear and everybody goes home for the night. There's a lot of things that take place after this. This is going to last for years for these people. So it's not simple, just run, hide, fight, everybody goes home with the all clear. Okay, it's a lot that goes into this.
And so perhaps the final part of that plan, when you get right down to it, is what happens after the incident. That takes a lot of planning. Who do you call in for support? How do you deal with people? How do you deal with the situation? How do you deal with the media when they come? Because they're going to be out there, you know that. So that's the final part of an entire full plan. Question in the back, sir.
You talked about a safety assessment. Do you have resources for us that someone could come in and help us walk through the building?
Absolutely, I do. And I'm going to put him on the spot, and I didn't know he was going to be here today. Mr. Brueggemann, president of Titan Group, came in and did our assessment, and he did a wonderful job, and I would definitely recommend him. And if he wasn't here today, I would do the same thing. As I told you earlier, I could help you out with those things, and I would reach out to Mike right away. He can do that for you.
Mike? Can I ask a question? You went in and did an assessment. Okay. Can we get a microphone over there? I want to ask you a question. It's a news reporter part of me coming out here. No, that's great.
You're on the spot.
Fill questions.
I call you up and say, come in and assess my building. Real quickly, walk us through that. What are you going to do? Where does it start? Does it start before you enter? Does it start at the curb? Does it start inside? And what happens?
Well, the first thing you do a risk assessment with the police department and what the risks are, what the crime in the area is. Look at that, do an evaluation on that, you rate that. Then you look at the facility from the outside, crime prevention through environmental design. Then you look at the physical security, the security technology, the cameras, access control, lockdowns. Then you go through the procedures. And like the board said, after you get through all that stuff, you come back and do an assessment, tell them what your recommendations are, and make a lot of good recommendations. So it doesn't take long. It takes, to how big the facility is, it could take you, it could take me 3-4 days. Have a team come in there and go through everything.
Okay, so that's to make sure, to look for holes in your system.
That's correct. You're looking for gaps, right? I
really appreciate the insight. Thank you very much. Tell us your company again.
That's Titan Group USA.
Titan.
www.Titan Group USA. I went to UAD, Titan, I guess. So, anyways.
U of what?
University of Detroit, the best
they
university
never heard of that here. They never heard
university.
Of that here. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Appreciate you coming. We appreciate you introducing them to us, because that's how you get places. It's about meeting new people and networking, which we talk about in a lot of different areas. Question over here, yes.
More of a comment. I've been the principal of a private school and pastor of a church. And of course, your liability insurer is very motivated to help you avoid risk. And he or she will give you a lot of personal attention to assess your physical space, not only for crime, but also for things like fire. And I live most of my life in Detroit, and of course you're worried about security, so you put iron bars on your windows, and then you have a fire and you can't get out. And it's that kind of balancing risk against risk that we may want to bear in mind when we think about security.
Very good point there. Just about 9 o'clock, but we have one more question here. Maybe it's a little after.
Hi. Just wanted to mention that one of the things that we did, we're a small school in Farmington Hills, and to get things going, we contacted the FBI. We had the FBI out twice. They're very happy to come out and help and do a quick assessment and tabletop exercises. And they do that, very quickly, and they're very helpful with that. And also the Farmington Hills Police Department. Most police departments are welcome to, generally want to come out and help too. So just wanted to point that out to people who want to find good, quick resources to get things rolling.
Great point, great point. As we wrap this up, let's just go around final thoughts as we end this discussion on something that's so important to us, but something we don't all know a lot about.
I just hope that you take something back with you from this presentation. It's, as someone mentioned, it's the world we live in. Things are changing. I mean, I go down to the McNamara building and all I see are barricades around the federal building. It makes you want to throw up, but that's the world we live in. So awareness, I think that's first and foremost. Be aware of your surroundings. I'm always aware of my surroundings, and I can say that many years ago I probably avoided getting mugged. I pulled into a parking lot, looked in my rearview mirror, and I see someone crouched down, making their way between the cars. It could have been me. I pulled away, but be aware of your surroundings and talk about what you see. Don't keep it inside, because everything that happens is it's a scenario that it's 1 + 1 + 1. When you put it all together, you get 3. But if you keep it to yourself, it goes by the wayside. So anything suspicious, share it with someone that you can trust.
Another personal story that just reminded me of something. When you walk into a restroom, I mean, what are you thinking when you walk into a restroom? Push the door all the way to the wall until you hear it hit the wall. Make sure there's nobody behind that door. I found a guy behind the door one time, and that's when I learned to push the door all the way to the wall to make sure there's nobody hiding in there waiting for somebody to come in. And it was a big department store here in metropolitan Detroit, which, by the way, is not here anymore. It's a long time ago. Final thought.
Well, a couple things. One of the first questions Murray asked was, are you aware of your emergency plan? And people half the room raise their hand, but are you familiar with it? It might be there and it's off to the side, but you have to be familiar with it, because you don't need something to happen and then not know what to do. You got to be familiar with it. For you people that have security programs, go back, and have them reevaluated, have those assessments done. For you that don't have the security departments, go back and start something, get with the leadership team and say, we got to get something moving, okay? Kind of like what Bill said, though, I think the biggest part is situational awareness. I was driving to work yesterday, and I was at Woodward and Adams. I see a young lady there in high heels and a bag on one hand, a bag on another hand, talking on a phone, and a coffee in another hand. Okay, and I look at that like, wow, if something happened, what would she do? How far is she going to get? Right? She's got all this stuff on her, right, and an earphone, and can't hear what's going on, not seeing what's going on because she's not aware of what's going on. You have to be aware of it, And we go through and we teach active shooter in our orientations. We get new employees. We teach them throughout the year. I even bring in DPD. Was in last week through the SHIELD program, came in for 2.5 hours and sat down with about 50 of our staff members, just as another voice to reiterate these things. But just because we teach, and we teach it at the DAC, is just because we teach it here, you apply this everywhere, okay? Just as Steve would do here at Lawrence Tech, his students can apply this when they're on spring break or you're in a movie theater or restaurant, those kind of things, because things happen all over the place. It's not just going to be in that controlled environment that something happened to the DAC, well, we'll look for Kevin and his team, because Kevin and his team aren't going to be there at a movie theater. Okay, so you have to know how to react. And I have a 6- and 8-year-old that I teach those things to. We walk into a restaurant, we walk into a movie theater, we walk anywhere, look for an exit sign. How do you get out of here? Those type of things. But it comes down to personal responsibility, because you're responsible for yourself, because there's not always going to be a security or police officer there. You have to know what to do to get out of those situations.
I think compliance is key, being consistent in your security program. A lot of times the video recorder's in the back room and no one really knows if it's working or not. We need to make that a priority to make sure that our technologies, our access control, our video systems are working at optimum levels. Make sure it's, there's a lot of affordable technology out there that we don't have to look at News at 11 and see the grainy picture and the person moving in a very kind of jagged manner. Take the time to assess that. Can you really see what you need to see? Do you have ample coverage on your campus or in your workplace? but most importantly, compliance. Make sure these things are working at optimum levels.
I would just like to say that I hope that the leaders of your organization put a high priority on your own personal safety as you do. I'm very fortunate here at Lawrence Tech, the president, the VP of Finance, the leadership of this university allows campus safety to do what we need to do to plug those holes and are in support of what our collective law enforcement experience tells us that we need to do here. And I hope that where you work, that your leadership and your organization allows your security department or whoever's running the show for you to do what's necessary. Campus safety is the messenger. We implement what the university wants, but we get very clear direction on what needs to be done. Here's the money to do it, make it happen, and make sure it's right. And I hope that your people think that you're as important as you think of yourself.
Thank you all very much for all of this important information today and for helping us. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all of your comments. Titan, we appreciate it. And thanks to our host, Lawrence Technological University, and our sponsors, AAA, Applied Imaging, CF Berger Creamery, ITC Holdings Corporation. We'll meet here again April the 19th. That's our next event, and our Leaders in Innovators series will take a look at we'll actually present a crash course in networking. If you want, I mentioned it before, one of the ways you get places is talk to people and network. 90% of the jobs are filled, we are told, by networking. So we're going to discuss that in detail on April the 19th. More information on our website. Thank you so much. It's not weekend yet, but have a great weekend when it gets here. Bye-bye.